Hey y'all, my name is Maddie Stevens. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a current first year master's student in the HESA program at Indiana Bloomington. I am currently serving as the graduate assistant in the Student Involvement and Leadership Center over leadership programs, and I'm going to pass it off over to Serena to introduce herself and kick us off for our presentation for you all today.
Hi everybody, my name is Serena Reyes. I'm also a first year HESA student as well at IU. I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Pembroke, and my assistantship is in residential programs and services as a graduate assistant in Ashton Residence Hall. Today we will be talking to you about our research that we composed for multiracial students and telling you a little bit more about it. So I will kick it back off to Maddie so she can kick us off.
Awesome. Thanks, Serena. I'm going to share my screen really fast so you all can see our academic poster, which covers our executive brief over our specific student population, which is multiracial students. To give a brief overview of this population, multiracial students are defined as students who come from two parents who hold different racial ancestries. And the population in America has been steadily growing since 2010. It was measured at 9 million people in 2010 by the US Census and is now closer to 33.8 million people in 2020, which is a 276% increase, which is crazy. As a result of continued growth, the number of multiracial college students is anticipated to increase across the nation. Looking to a historical background of this group, there has been a limited and imprecise data on multiracial people, which also contributes to multiracial students being an underexplored group on college campuses. Some of the gaps that we've seen specifically with this group can be contributed to just historical exclusion of multiracial categories in survey research and analytical decisions which obscure or omit multiracial people in empirical research, as well as collapsing multiracial individuals into one of their racial components. So forcing them to choose one of their racial identities rather than giving them the option to choose a multiracial identity. As mentioned before, multiracial people are one of the fastest growing demographic groups in the last few decades. And between 2010 and 2018, the college enrollment of multiracial students has also increased by over 120%. And looking at that information came from the US Department of Education, and we've got a graph down here that digs into that a little deeper, which, as you can see, in 2000, there's not even a data point that we can point to, again, kind of pointing back to that gap in research and the inability for multiracial students to be able to self-identify as such. Then we see a steady increase in 2010 and then again in 2018. As we talk more about this group, some relevant terms and definitions to be familiar with that occur commonly in literature and research related to this group are multiraciality, which is a broad term that pertains to multiracial or mixed race identity categories, groups, or phenomena. Monoracism, which is the systemic social oppression that targets individuals who do not fit into multiracial categories or groups, and microaggressions, which are brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative racial slights and insults towards people of color. Multiracial students are a very diverse group, and it's important to note that they are not monolithic. They might have different identities within their multiracial identities. While a lot of research right now currently focuses on students who identify as Black and white, there could be any number of combinations of multiracial identities that span across a wide variety of racial ancestries. In considering this variance, investigations using 4 years of data from the National Survey of Student Engagement showed that there are differences in engagement among multiracial students from different racial heritage groups and across institutional types, which is a really interesting point and illuminates diversity among multiracial students and institutional diversity as a factor in student engagement that we should definitely consider when thinking about practices with this student population. Some current trends and issues that face multiracial college students, they have a number of challenges, specifically racial microaggressions, policing of racial categories, and just general feelings of isolation from monoracial groups. Multiracial individuals also tend to score worse on measures of mental health than monoracial people and experience elevated levels of depression, lower rates of satisfaction, and higher rates of suicidality. That's something that we definitely need to look into and be mindful of as we consider issues of development and the college experience for the student population. This graph in the center here kind of encapsulates a lot of those different phenomenon, historical, behavioral, and psychological impacts on multiracial students and how that affects their student outcomes overall, and considering other factors that we'll get into regarding campus climate and the community. And so I'm going to pass it over to Serena to talk a little bit more in depth about some of those, as well as the issues of development and their student experience.
All right, thank you for that, Maddie, and thank you for sharing so far. So next we'll be talking about some issues of development and how multiracial students are more vulnerable because they struggle to find community on campus because they feel like their exclusion for failing to be monoracial enough or their multiracial identity is denied by both their white and non-white monoracial peers. So this leads into the exploration stage and how exploration and affirmation are important components of positive racial identity development. However, multiracial youth seem to spend more time in their exploration stage because they try to navigate, okay, who they really are. Am I really enough to be in both multiracial identities, or do I feel enough, like I'm part of enough in either or? And this leads just overall to a negative experience due to society's discomfort, which leads into their collegiate experience and how multiracial students have the opportunity to build their own identities outside of their racial identification of their parents. And this is the first time they are really like on their own and navigating life by themselves, regardless of their personal viewpoints from home and how their parents taught them to navigate through life, either potentially one way or another. And this leads to the policing of racial boundaries that also Maddie did touch on previously, and how monoracial people lead to us. It can lead to a sense of racial homelessness and social displacement in multiracial students because it might feel like monoracial students are targeting them for being part of a multiracial group or having multiple identities instead of just one. And then it shows how studies show that multiracial students have difficult claiming multiracial oppression, which indicates that there needs to be more education about monoracism as a system of oppression in the sense of collegiate experience, so that leading into higher education implications for higher education and how schools have diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives such as strategic action plans. But we realize that the wording is for monoracial students and it doesn't include multiracial identities as well. So starting to have more inclusive words that target multiracial identities as well as still target monoracial identities as well. And this leads to college campuses needing to have specific spaces designed for multiracial or multi-ethnic students. And it leads back to if a mixed race student is wanting to commit their education to a particular college campus, such as a HBCU or PWI, it is essential that they know how to navigate not only with that monoracial lens of potentially attending a PWI or HBCU or an MSI, but seeing that they still have their other multiracial identity that they can still find comfort in even while they're navigating through a monoracial school. So some strategies would be avoid contributing to the cycle of monoracial socialization, and then challenge multiracial students to think about their race not only through a monoracial lens, but incorporate it as a multiracial one to see and be aware of the intersectionalities that they might have, and power and privilege and even oppression that they might experience in each of those identities. And then allow students overall just to have a option for self-identification and to change their self-identification over time, because this is a unique experience for them because they might be going through the feelings of, am I good enough? Am I good enough? I know I'm good enough. How can I overcome these feelings? And then overall, offer multiracial groups in university counseling centers so that they have a sense of belonging within the community and see other students might be going through something similar to what they're going through. Overall, that is it for my part. We do thank you for listening and accepting our research. Overall, I will turn it back to Maddie for any last words.
Awesome. Thanks again, Serena. And thank you all for listening. We hope you learned something and hope that you can take some of these practices into your work across college campuses across the country. Have a great day.